This week we have a testimony that not even I know what it's about yet. So stay tuned. Welcome to Testimony Tuesday. I'm your host, Charles Gates Jr., and this is my guest this week is Pastor Luke Hild. How are you doing, Luke?
I'm doing good.
Wonderful. So, we have a testimony that not even I heard yet. So, how about that? What's our topic of discussion today?
Okay, so since it's a surprise for you, even you right now, I won't even tell you the subject. I'll let you kind of get that as you go.
Okay, it's going to be fun.
But yeah, so I got this call from my dad. I've talked to him a few times lately, which is really cool. His and I's relationship has been getting better, in recent years, and that's been great. But just so you know, before I share any of this, I asked him his permission to share this. I was excited when he told me this testimony, so I didn't want to just share it off stage if he wasn't comfortable with it.
Right. I'm excited to hear this testimony.
Yeah. So my dad, he's had his struggles with his faith in recent years, and so he actually, when he called me to tell me that he had to share something with me and with my brother. Because he was so excited by what God was done. I'm like, okay, now I got to hear this.
That's a pretty special moment then.
Yeah. Now he has him and my mother have been like binge watching our live streams lately, because it's been affecting them up in Maine too, being stuck in the house, and now they're out and my parents live out in the boondocks. If you live in a city, or if you even live around here, you may think you're in the boondocks here, but this is not the boondocks, okay? They live out there ways. And it's beautiful land where they have. It's barely any neighbors any place. I mean, you have a lot of land to yourself. They do have one neighbor in sight. That's it from their house.
Yeah, I've lived in Tennessee before. It's pretty
has areas
pretty
like
fun
that.
Having places like you can go play in the woods and stuff. And up in Maine, I'm sure they have a lot.
Yes. Yep. So, anyway, so my dad, he's been watching a lot of our live streams, and he's been getting encouraged by it. And so that was really exciting for me. But he told me this last Sunday, my mother was going to the drive-in church that their church was having, and he decided, you know what, today it's supposed to be kind of cool out. I have some work I need to do in the woods, and he decided to go do that instead of going to church. And like I said, he's been having some struggles with faith, though God's definitely been working in his life. But he made the decision, hey, I'm going to stay home today. So he had to get these particular trees, and he owns some wooded property like across the road. He owns I can't remember how many acres, but he didn't have any of them on there. It was in his back lot of his house out in the woods there was one place that had these trees, and the woods there are very dense. I mean, you don't just see in the woods, because the edge of the woods that's it, it's done, and
so there's no trails or anything.
Yeah, well there is, but if you're outside trying to look into the woods, you don't see into the woods because it's very thick on the edges. So he's in there, and he has several of these trees he's cutting down. They're really big trees, and the one tree comes down and is resting up on its limbs. So it's cut, but the trunk is still on the stump. Okay, and so as he is he cuts it down, it falls, and he's coming up to start delimbing it or something, and suddenly the tree slides off the stump and lands on his foot.
Oh.
Now, he did have steel toe boots on, but the stump landed where the contact point was. It was partially on his steel toe and partially on the top of your arch, so the very top of your foot.
Right.
he said if it would have gone one more inch, it probably would have come off the steel toe boot part and would have crushed his foot. But he said it was extremely painful. It took him to his knees. He had dropped his the chainsaw out of reach. He was pinned there, so he couldn't reach the chainsaw.
So was this a big tree then?
Yes, it was a really big tree. It pinned him there, like he was going no place. And though it kept, like I said, the steel toe kept his foot from being immediately crushed. If it slid anymore, I mean, this is a whole tree, just because it's resting on your foot, that's not going to stop it.
Right, and steel toes are only made to endure so much. If it's run over by like a forklift, it's gonna crush your foot and stuff like that. So can imagine how much pain he must have been in. And
yeah, so he's trying to dig out, like he's trying to, he's kind of like, I'm sure like kind of in panic mode right now, like trying to dig his foot out. He said afterwards, like when he thought back, he said, it's probably a good thing I couldn't dig myself out from under it, because it probably would have made it slide more. Because he was trying to dig his foot out, but he just couldn't. The weight of it wouldn't allow him to get like underneath his foot.
Right.
So he remembers. You know what? He has his phone had been. I can't remember if it was stolen or destroyed or something happened. So he lost his cell phone. He didn't have a cell phone for a while.
Didn't have his cell phone.
Well, but he had just got it back. And so he just like, I can't remember if he said the night before or that day, he just got his phone back. And so he had it with him, but he didn't have all his contacts in it, because it was it was, like I said, he just got it back. So he wanted to try and get a hold of his neighbor. Like I said, he has one neighbor, but his phone number wasn't in it yet. So he's racking his brain what to do. He calls 911. And they're going to send an ambulance, but he's telling them, look, there's somebody right here, because, like I said, he's out in the boondocks. The ambulance is not going to be there in 5 minutes. It's going to be a while. So he's telling him, if you can find this guy's number, this guy is, he's my neighbor. Call him, tell him. So they find his number. They get a hold of this guy. Now, this guy, he's got some issues too with walking. Like he doesn't usually go very far because he has some problems with his, I think it's his feet. Something's wrong with his feet. So he comes out of his house. And remember I said this is in the woods. He's about 50 yards in, and these are very dense woods. But my father said there was one little sliver, like this hole in the woods, where he could see out, and he saw right where that guy came out of his door. That from where he was pinned down on his knees, there was one little place he could see his neighbor. Now, I didn't think about this till after. He said he's there and he's waving, and the guy looked down and saw him down there, okay? In that one little spot. Because, there's a lot of woods there. You get somebody telling you third hand, hey, your neighbor's stuck in the woods someplace and needs you to come get him out. That doesn't tell you a whole lot if you're out in the woods.
Yeah, I've had a trained eye. Usually when people are trained to see that, they're like military trained, like to spot like things moving and like find a needle in a haystack. And
yeah, well, you think about it, like when you're outside in the daylight and you're looking into the woods.
Yeah. Usually,
even if there is a clear path, you can't see anything because it's like it's dark in there. You're out in the daylight and that person's in the shade. So I didn't think about it till after, but I think it was a godsend that the guy could even see him through that little hole, because truthfully, he shouldn't have been able to. But so he sees him. He's far enough out. It takes him like 15 minutes to get to him. Now, this guy, he like I said, he was slow walking because he had some issues with his feet. But still, it took him 15 minutes to get out there. He gets there. He gets his chainsaw, and luckily this man was skillful with a chainsaw. And he was able to cut things and to finally get his foot out from underneath it. So he gets his foot out. But about the time they get his foot out and he's moving around, he's like, you know what? I don't think anything's broken. He was like shocked because it was like nothing's broken. And so they're actually coming back when the ambulance shows up. they're like coming out of the woods, and the ambulance shows up, and they're checking his foot out, and there's bruising and stuff. But they said, hey, it looks like your foot's going to be okay.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah. And my dad, like I said, he's had his struggles of faith in recent years, but he said, what the way he expressed it to me is like, I really felt that God saved my foot from being crushed. And he said, I think it was God just showing me, hey, I'm still here. Even though, his life has not been, perfect, which none of our lives are perfect, but you know what I mean? He's had his struggles, and he really felt it was God trying to get his attention and say, look, I'm still here. And that very much encouraged him, because he's felt, when we're not living the way we feel like we should in the Lord, sometimes we can start to self-condemn ourselves. We can start to feel all the shame. And so that spoke to him so profoundly that God still cared. And it's so profoundly that he starts trying to witness to his neighbor. And he's kind of, not knowing exactly what to say. But one of the EMTs actually goes, so you're trying to say that you think God has saved your foot? Or something along those lines. Like, basically the EMT jumped in and helped him along. So it was
that's awesome.
And he just got a chance to share with his neighbor a little bit, and and just to see my father so encouraged, it was just a very cool thing. God, sometimes we can have family that we think they're just never going to come around. We can get that mindset. I hear people say all the time, like, we'll talk about these live streams and we'll be like, these will reach people that will never step foot in a church. I think we need to stop limiting God. We get that mindset of like, well, they would never, and we get that way with our family. We're like, oh, they'll never come around. They're always going to do this.
Yeah, a lot of people view that as judgment too, against them, and they feel like you're condemning them and stuff.
Yeah, and I think when Christians do that, I think most of the time it's just there's a frustration. They get discouraged. Christians can get discouraged too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think that's all it is. But the problem is we forget we serve a God that can still work miracles.
Yeah, God of the impossible. As I heard that testimony, I tell you, there are so many things that, if calculated just a sliver differently, things could have went drastically wrong. As Luke mentioned, if that tree was resting even a couple inches away from where it was, it could have broken, crushed his foot, could have taken it off. Could have given him so many problems health-wise down the road. And the supernatural ability that his neighbor had with being able to see him in the dark woods when it's so bright outside around him. Yeah. Anybody who's worked in show business knows how delicate light is and how that works. And light versus darkness, and positioning things just a certain way, and it's like it's a divine setup for God to say, son, I see you, I know where you're at, I am there with you, protecting you, guiding you, and I will get you out of this situation. I will help you because I love and I care for you. And I know that testimony encouraged me. I hope it encouraged you all too.
I just want to say before we go, Dad, I love you. I'll talk to you later.
That is all for this week's Testimony Tuesday. Thank you, Luke, for coming on the show.
No problem.
Stay tuned for next week. I don't know what we can talk about yet, but I know it's going to be fabulous, extraordinary. Thank you. God bless.